Denise Carter balanced trays with one arm wrapped in bandages, pushing through the pain while her manager Ross tore into her for every small mistake, his voice sharp enough for the entire diner to hear. Some customers whispered, pitying her, while others shook their heads at his cruelty, but none dared intervene. What no one knew was that the bandages around Denise's hand told a story far darker than clumsiness, and Ross's anger wasn't just about spilled drinks or late orders. In the corner booth sat Harold, an older man with sharp eyes who seemed like a quiet regular, yet every detail Denise and Ross revealed fed into a suspicion that something was very wrong. The diner smelled of burnt coffee and bacon grease, the morning rush humming with chatter, the sizzle of eggs on the grill, and the clang of plates. But above it all, Ross's constant berating cut through like a knife. Denise, hair pulled back in a messy bun, apron stained from hours of work, moved between tables with the quiet determination of someone who had no choice but to endure. Her left hand, wrapped in bandages from wrist to fingers, throbbed with every movement, yet she masked the pain behind tired smiles for customers who barely noticed. Her good hand carried mugs of coffee and steaming plates balanced against her hip, while her eyes avoided Ross's glare. Ross leaned against the counter, arms crossed, smirking as he waited for her to falter. He thrived on her struggle, and when she finally stumbled, brushing his arm and spilling a glass of water down his shirt, the room froze. The diner went silent, except for the faint hiss of the grill. Ross leaned close, his words venomous, scolding her in front of everyone as she stammered an apology. Reaching for a towel, he snatched away with mockery. A few customers muttered that he was being too harsh, but Ross ignored them, his gaze fixed on Denise, reminding her who held the power. Denise's eyes lowered, shame burning in her chest, but inside, fear gripped tighter than embarrassment. She remembered all too well what Ross had done weeks earlier. It had been late one evening when she was cleaning after close, the diner empty except for Ross counting the register. She had passed by just in time to hear him bragging over the phone about skimming cash from the drawer. He had been sloppy, laughing about how nobody ever checked the numbers closely. Denise had gasped before she could stop herself, and Ross had spun around, his expression changing from surprise to rage. He cornered her, grabbing her wrist with such force that she felt the sickening crack of bone. She cried out, but there was no one left to hear. He had leaned close, voice low and cold, warning her to keep quiet or the next injury would be worse. Now, every time she looked at her bandaged hand, the memory flashed fresh. Through the weeks, Denise returned to work because she had no choice. Rent was due, bills piled up, and she had no savings to fall back on. She worked with pain and silence, while Ross painted himself as a strict but responsible manager, hiding his theft behind her suffering. But what Ross hadn't counted on was Harold. Sitting in the corner booth each day, Harold had watched carefully. He saw the bruises, the fear, the way Denise's eyes flickered whenever Ross loomed near. He studied the books quietly after hours, using his authority in secret. Because Harold wasn't just a regular customer. He was the true owner of the diner, having stepped back from daily operations but still checking in under the guise of a simple patron. And what he found confirmed his suspicions. The numbers didn't add up. The cash register had gaps, and Ross's cruelty was more than just poor management. It was a mask for criminal theft. The very next morning, Harold returned not alone, but flanked by 2 police officers. The diner was busy with the breakfast rush when he stood from his usual booth, drawing attention. Ross froze as Harold walked forward with a steady calm that carried weight. Customers turned as Harold's voice rang out, no longer soft but commanding. He introduced himself as the real owner of the diner, pulling back the disguise that had hidden him in plain sight. Gasps rippled through the room as he revealed Ross's theft, backed by the evidence he had uncovered. Ross sputtered, his face draining of color, trying to deny it, but the officers stepped forward. In front of everyone, customers, staff, and Denise, Ross was handcuffed, his arrogant smirk wiped away. The same customers who had once pitied Denise now muttered in anger at him, some even clapping as he was led out the door. When the noise settled, Harold turned to Denise. His tone softened, carrying kindness she had not expected. He told her he had seen her strength and honesty, even through the hardest of trials. Instead of losing her job, she was being promoted to supervisor, a role she had more than earned. Tears welled in her eyes, her lips trembling as she tried to thank him. Around her, the diner erupted in applause, customers and co-workers cheering for her resilience. For the first time in weeks, the knot in her chest loosened, and she smiled, truly smiled, without pain shadowing it. The diner felt lighter, as though the air itself had shifted from tension to hope. Ross was gone, his lies and cruelty stripped bare, and Denise stood taller, no longer burdened by silence. Justice had not only arrived, it had revealed her courage to everyone. And in that moment, surrounded by clapping hands and warm faces, she knew she had survived the storm and stepped into the light.